I worked at was totally owned by the mob. It was like Goodfellas, where they're busting out the restaurant, running up credit on the joint, running up, charging everything on the joint's credit, and then they're just gonna like burn the place down or something, right? I worked for those guys a little bit and had to get out of that. It was like a full-on mob place. When I was 18 years old, I landed a job in Germany. I was an illegal alien. I know we're not supposed to say that, but I'm okay with the distinction, right? I was an illegal alien over in Germany on a little island in the middle of the North Sea. I just kept getting restaurant jobs, and eventually I decided, hey, I've heard that people do this for a living, why not keep with it, right? I enrolled in a culinary school at a local junior college where I happen to be working right now, okay? I went through their program, and after that I went to the CIA, and then I got into hotels after that, and just bounced around the country after that, everywhere, working for Hyatt Hotels for many, many years. In hotels are very, very different than restaurants, okay? I've been working in restaurants. I'm gonna turn this down, it's going a little fast. Look at my heat here. I was working in restaurants, and I went to school and I did an externship at a hotel. And I've never seen anything like it. There's all these different departments, there's pastry shops, most restaurants are buying cakes and things like that. Hardly any restaurants are doing their own desserts, right? Unless they're very high end, right? I just wasn't seeing that kind of stuff out there in the hotel. Another great thing is like, hey, you get benefits, the paychecks clear the bank when you try to cash them. I've had several jobs where, my checks don't clear when I try and cash my paycheck, right? So I was just in love with hotels, man. Everything you need is right there, and you can just learn so much. So I just kept working those hotels and traveling all around the country, and eventually bounced into a couple other jobs. Man, it just gets its hooks into you. I'm one of those adrenaline junkies. You can see how I bounce around so much, and it just really fit my lifestyle. That cooking thing, I'm a little bit OCD. I like keeping things clean, and so that's a good thing for a chef. And also I'm a little bit, what do you call that, ADHD slightly, right? And so it's really cool to be cooking on the line because I got about 9 pans together. That's perfect for somebody that's ADHD, right? It's just like I got all this stuff going around. I don't have to focus on any one thing. I'm just focusing on everything. And like I said, it just seemed kind of a natural fit. I was eventually lucky enough to get into teaching, right? And actually changing the career, because I'll tell you, chefing is a young man's game. You can't do it forever. I'm getting a little gray in the hair here and everything, and I was lucky enough to make a change into a whole new career that still allows me to work with food, right? It's not like the old days. I don't have my hot hands as much anymore, right? I can't touch the hot things like I used to be able to do. And I don't have my knife callus anymore. It's pretty much worn off. You usually have a callus right there in your hand. Mine's gone. It's gone. It's history. Okay, so my duck breasts are rendering. They're cruising right along. I'm just going to take one little peek and just make sure that they're not getting any color, because I am so not looking for color right now. This is about rendering, totally not anything else. We're cruising along very nicely. I'm starting to get some fat in the pan. I'm not sure how well you can see, but I can tilt. You can already see fat and probably some moisture in that pan. That moisture is going to cook away, kind of stick to the pan, and that fat will be left behind. And that duck fat is a precious, precious commodity in the kitchen, right? Chefs love duck fat. I just bought some duck fat at the local store the other day, right? It is delicious in things like potatoes and duck fat French fries, things like that. It's a match made in heaven. If you've never played with duck fat, go out and experiment with it, because it's really, really good. And I will say, I'm not just saying this because I work for a duck company or something, right? I just love that duck fat, okay? Let me see, who else is here? Kristen Lopez, Angelina, Diana, Gregory Berger, the man, Lauren Whittam, Elena, Simone. Wow, good to see you guys. Awesome. Joe Perez, another old student. Great to see you guys. Okay, so while my duck is rendering, we've talked about rendering, okay? It's low and slow. The desired result is rendering is that you've cooked all of the fat out of the product, basically, right? I always talk about, in my definitions, what is the desired result? And in this, I'm trying to cook out the fat. Eventually, usually that rendered item is a little bit crispy, or you may not go quite that far, right? It's up to you how far you want to go. Ultimately, rendering is low temp, cooking out the fat, okay? The next temperature range I want to go to, usually the rendering's like 180, 190, about in that area. I'm not looking for color here. The next temperature range I want to talk about is our pan frying temperature range, okay? Last week we were talking about searing. Now I'm talking about pan frying, and it's totally, totally different. Pan frying is not the same as saute, and I'll talk about saute a little bit too, actually. So that's a good thing to talk about. So pan fry. When we are doing pan fry is a low temperature technique. I always kind of compare it to searing, which is high temperature and a small amount of fat. We're looking for golden brown at the end, right? With pan frying, we are looking for a lower temperature, usually about 200 to like 225 or something like that, maybe 250 or something. I'm taking things kind of low and slow, and the idea with pan frying is, the second thing about pan frying, it's a low temp. The second thing is, it's a large amount of fat. Saute with just a tiny amount of fat, kind of enough to coat the bottom of the pan, maybe a little more, okay? With this item, let's pretend my fist is a chicken thigh or something like that. Fried chicken is all about pan frying. If I take a chicken thigh and drop it into a deep fryer at 350 degrees, it'll be golden brown on the outside. Yeah, it looks beautiful, but you take a bite into it and it's dead raw inside. Nobody wants chicken like that, right? And so we take that chicken thigh, and instead of dropping it in a deep fryer, we put it into fat about halfway up the side of that item. I'm trying to get a good angle here so you can see, okay? I cook it on this side low and slow until it gets kind of golden brown. And by the time it reaches golden brown, the bottom half here is all cooked through and through. Now I flip it over, it's still at halfway in the fat, and now the other half of that chicken thigh is getting cooked. And we take our time with it, and the heat penetrates, and by the time it's golden brown on that second side, it's cooked through and through. This is how we get that fried chicken cooked all the way. It's by going a little bit lower and slower. That's what pan frying is all about. When I was a kid, my grandma had her cast iron skillet on the stove all the time. I still do that too. I got a cast iron skillet that lives on my stove, okay? And she was pan frying in that thing all the time. Every day she used that thing, whether it was breakfast or dinner or whatever. She was from Kentucky, and she did that southern cuisine, and that was the only food I ever saw as a child, was at my grandmother's house when I visited her. And she could just snap her fingers, and there was a 9-quart, a giant southern fried chicken dinner on the table like instantly. It was just crazy to watch, right? So that's what pan frying is all about. It's a lower temperature, more fat than searing, and it's about cooking an item through and through. Let's talk about searing again. Searing, we're getting up to temperatures like, higher than 325. Usually we have what's called caramelization. That's sugars, browning. That happens about 325. We also have something called the Maillard or Maillard effect. I've heard it pronounced both ways, okay? This Maillard effect, it happens at about 310 degrees, and this is usually what we're seeing on meats and things like that, right? And so that 310 to 325, that's where I'm going to start seeing browning, so I got to be at least that hot to get any browning whatsoever. And when I'm searing, I'm probably getting even hotter than that, right? Because the goal there, the only goal of searing is getting the outside brown. Searing doesn't necessarily cook the item through and through, and that's very important because when I'm doing catering and things like that, I work at hotels, it's like giant catering machines, monsters, right? And a lot of times, hey, I'm doing 500 chicken breasts or something, I'll sear them all, but they're dead raw inside, and then when it's time for the party, I flash them in a super, super hot oven, I pull them out, I let them rest, and when I serve them, they're still nice and moist and juicy and everything. They're golden brown, delicious, all of that good stuff, okay? So, let's see, we talked about we talked about rendering, we talked about pan fry, we talked about searing just then. Let's talk about saute, because I put saute in another class from searing, because most chefs I know, when I say saute, they might be thinking searing, but the other thing that goes with saute is, let me kind of back up, okay? Saute starts with searing. High heat, small amount of fat, looking for golden brown, right? Saute, I do need to cook the item all the way, so there's a difference. Searing, I don't. Searing is just about the golden brown, right? With the saute, I cook that item all the way, and what I'll do is I initially sear it in a pan, and I get these little crispy bits in the pan that we call fond. It's the foundation of flavor, basically, right? It's literally the foundation, right? And so those little crispy bits in the pan, that's flavor, and what I'll do is I'll remove the item I'm cooking, chicken breast, whatever it is. I get it out of there, set it aside, let it rest, And then I get rid of my fat in that pan. I take those little crispy bits and I deglaze them with some alcohol, and I throw it down on the fire again, and I kind of reduce that alcohol down, and maybe I've worked in a little mushroom or shallot along the way or something like that, right? Once I get that alcohol cooked all the way down, we call it au sec. It's dry in the pan. Completely changes the flavor of that wine. If you don't reduce all the way, it's going to taste like when you're eating steak and tasting your sauce, it tastes like a glass of wine. It's not what I want. I want that wine to concentrate to like resin, to where it's sweet and caramelizing and completely changing the flavor profiles of that wine, right? Once I get that wine reduced all the way down, and you guys know what I'm talking about reducing, we're simmering the water out of it and it reduces the volume, right? Once I get that wine all the way down, I add some chicken stock, say, or some demi-glace, like a veal stock or something like that. I reduce that down to almost sauce consistency, and then I might throw a little pat of butter in there, swirl it in, and serve it with the chicken that I seared, okay? So saute, in a nutshell, to me, searing is just getting golden brown, and saute, the difference is I'm cooking the item all the way, and then I'm generating a pan sauce with the fond that I created with the searing process. Does that all make sense, right? It's kind of a thing. I don't know if I might be the only chef in the world that thinks of it this way, but when I'm talking to other chefs, honestly, I'm talking about a saute item. I think most of them are picturing some kind of sauce on that thing once it's done. It's not just a seared thing on a plate, right? It's got a sauce, right? So that's kind of what the difference to me between searing and saute, for what it's worth, okay? So let me kind of roll down. Danny Butler, Patrick Brennan. Let me get all the way down here. Allison Collier, good to see you. Diane McNally, Carrie Allen. I think Allison Collier, you've done almost every darn class I've ever given in town at one time or another. Good stuff. I'm going to check out my duck again. Let's take a look at this. Yeah. Now I'm just kind of grabbing the side, and I'm getting some color here. You guys see that? Not what I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn things down. This guy's getting more color than I want too. But another thing I want to point out, I'll just turn things down. I want to take it lower and slower. Another thing I want to point out, check all that duck fat rolling around in there, okay? I'm still on that first side. I'm not trying to cook this duck breast. I'm trying to render the skin. That's all we're doing right now, okay? So we're going to keep on rendering that out, cooking that skin until it all looks like crispy bacon, okay? Now, while that's going on, let me check these potatoes real quick. That's going to be the next thing, is to knock out a batch of gnocchi, okay? And if they're not quite done, I'm going to do a little bit of other prep while we're waiting, okay? We got lots to talk about. Okay, I got my potatoes. They're a little bit warm, so let me just pull them out. And we're going to let them chill just for a sec. Oven's off. Ouch, ouch, ouch. They're a little hot. And I'll roll those around a little bit. We'll cool them for a bit. I think what we'll do while those are cooling is, I just need them to cool till cool them enough to handle them and peel them and things like that. It won't take long. I think what I'll do is knock out some cuts here. I want to cut up this butternut squash. I'm going to dice that up. And I'm also going to maybe slice a few herbs and let this thing cool off. And then we're going to make some gnocchi and get into that. Okay? See any questions out there? Anybody got questions? I see a hi there, Diane. I clean as I go now because I'm teaching my youngest daughter. That's awesome. Clean as you go, Frank. God, chefs have the most interesting life paths, I swear. Yeah, it was interesting. You know, I want to say, when I was talking about being that feral child, I'm not complaining because it was awesome. I had such a fun childhood. Nobody told me what to do. I was like, you know, Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn down at the river every day, and just like, you know, never went to school or anything. Yeah, all of it's true. I had to catch up much later in life. I had to pick up at school and just learn it all over again because I never went to school as a kid. I was totally out there on the streets. It was a blast. Yeah. Let's see, any other questions? Well, I guess not. Steve Sal, good to see you. Tamara, Bill Collins, excellent. All right, so my duck breast is still rolling right along. I'm gonna get my cutting board out, and we're gonna do a couple of cuts here. And this is just, I'll be honest, guys, I'm just killing time. It's showbiz, right? Da, 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 da. Ba, 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 ba. Okay. Where do you buy your duck? Excellent question. Let me shout it out again because, there's another question. I picked up this duck. This is Liberty Farm duck from Dixon, California. So it's local. These are humanely raised. These ducks are loved, they might even have names.